any rate, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the introduction, Barbara. I'd like to compliment the other speakers that have given their presentations this morning. As well, there was a whole series last year, a year ago at this conference, of very good content on parts of the industry. But mine is going to be different than that. My thoughts that I was asked to think about was the industry, what it is, where it's going, and that part of it. So I have some biases in that, so I won't necessarily declare every bias. I did consult 8 people for their thoughts, people who I have high regard for their opinion, and 5 in Canada and 3 in the United States. I think I'm a little bit on there, but at any rate, what we're talking about here, I want to let you know that I'm thinking it from a farmer's point of view. And we have this industry for the success of the farmers. So if I'm making any comments for organizations, just think about the fact that we have farmers and their success. Well, I had to learn how to use this, Brad. Well, that's the point at which I put green goes ahead. There we go. So Brian gave me the title of Leadership and Vision from the Sidelines. So I guess I am from the sidelines, Brian. And but at any rate, I'd like to address it from the point of view of innovation, creativity, and stepping up. And that really is the people in this room stepping up. Thinking about life from a different point of view. I want you to turn to your neighbor right now and say what you believe in that second statement there. Are we varnishing the past or building the future? So just tell your neighbor, honestly tell him, are you here today to varnish the past or to build the future? Because if you're going to varnish the past, if you're going to varnish the past, please go to lunch. I mean that seriously. Because we're all here, and we all have some influence, but if we aren't prepared to lead where we're going, we're in difficulty in Canada, in dairy cattle improvement industry. So let's do a little bit of a profile of where we are. I know I'm a little, limited on time, but probably go over, Madam Chairman. We have 10,000 birds, maybe more, 86 cows per herd, almost 1 million cows, but we're only 1.6 at best % of the global cows. So we aren't a big player in this world. Mostly in Ontario and Quebec, we've seen that. We have a high participation rate in breed improvement programs. And we've held that over from the past. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but so compared to other countries, especially neighbors to the south. But the big challenge on every farm is this modernization, and it occurs in equipment. It occurs in the generations of people that are there. Everything's changing and changing very quickly, and many speakers have spoken about that. And one of the things when I was talking to the producers that I consulted was they wanted their information to be collected in one spot, where they don't have animal movement here and heat detection over here and rumination over here and all these other things going on. Because then they have to bring it together and they don't feel that they're getting maximum benefit from it. Is that true? That's true. People are nodding their heads, some of them are not here, but at any rate. So we have an industry. What happens if NAFTA and all those things are signed and milk, our supply management is somewhat different than it is now, and we have 200 cows instead of 86 per herd. What happens then? We have 4,750 producers at best then. Is that big enough? We're a small country and we have to work together and we have to work efficiently and we have to find partners on that, and we'll get into that. One of the things that really helped us a long while ago was we had 25% of the global semen market. I don't know what the percent is now, but it's probably lower than that. And that money coming back into Canada paid for research and development. It paid for herd incentive fees for milk recording or for type classification. Those incentive things have gone. We're in a different time, and we're going to have to address that. Look at there. United States, they have 234 cows per herd. New Zealand have 414. United States won't be too long before it's over 500 and heading towards 750. New Zealand will be at 1,000 in the not too distant future. That's the size of herd that data is being collected on in those countries. So that's what we have to compare to. So are we still a global leader? And we'll get all kinds of answers to that. By 2030, they tell us that we'll need 130% globally, 130% of the milk that we have right now. So there's potential there to do something, I think. But the next 2 billion people are going to live in Asia or Africa. Are we going to be allowed to transport milk from North America to all those countries? Powder, whatnot? I don't know. It's costly. I think you probably know, but of the grocery cart that you take, your wife or whoever takes the grocery cart, 16% of that comes back to farms. In the grain industry, it's only 6%. In the dairy industry, United States, it's about 40%. In Canada, it's about 66%. Is that going to continue? Or are the margins going to be cut back for our producers that they have to start thinking about what they participate in and what livestock improvement really is? So let's talk about the challenges. Here's some of the things we've done in the past together. Milk recording, 10%. When I graduated from university a long while ago, okay. And then was able to move to 70%. But that was an industry working together. When I wrote my master's thesis, it was on young cider proving, so I have a bias that way. But they were, in Ontario, they were sampling 14 young ciders per year. In Canada, we got to 400 Holsteins and 40 or 50 Ayrshires and so on. We got to that, genomics changed it. But that was an investment that was put in, and so it was industry working it together. Privatization of milk recording. Well, remember traveling across the country, privatizing milk recording in every province. But now we're bringing it back together. It was like ROP was kind of the standard back then. We sent it out to all the provinces. Now we're bringing it back together. Great idea, I think. And then I left off Brian, but there was a futures group in 1993 that talked about how could industry work together. And there was a lot of discussion. CDN was one of the things that came out of the futures group. And Brian mentioned the research, great, and all the things that happened there. And there were a number of recommendations, and we probably achieved about 70% of those recommendations. But the ones that we were afraid to do was databases and duplications. And boards of directors and staff are all responsible for not having made that decision. I have to own that as well. But we didn't make the tough decisions about how to be competitive. We thought about protecting our organizations. Now, what's coming along now? Well, I call it privatization of CDN. That's what I was meaning there, Brian, by privatization of genetic evaluations. DHIs, whatever you call them, have been working on more real-time data, helping farmers manage more. Great. And then genomics came, and it really threw us for a curve, because some people are still, 10 years later, almost 10 years later, still fighting genomics, and aren't prepared to use that information. So it was welcomed by some and fraught by others, but here is a division point that we haven't really addressed in our industry. Where are we at now? What are the opportunities? And those are the opportunities that I see as being available to us right now in 2018. Now, globally, there's considerable competition for what we do. There's various organizations, I guess I better not mention their name, but are in the United States that are capturing data, and people are going off DHI because they can get their traceability, or they can get all those things that are potentially will in time have that in order to be able to run their farm. So in Canada, we'll have that competition coming in here and wanting to work on our larger farms. So we're going to need to be prepared as an industry how we do that. Because what's going to happen is if someone has the data, they can do the evaluations. I mean, they can do the herd management information. They can do the genetic evaluations. If they got the genomics, they can do everything. So you're going to have a private group doing it. So do you believe the reports that car companies put out on their cars? Most of us do, I guess. We buy cars. And so we say, oh, well, it's not official. Oh, come on now, people. Not official? What does that matter to a farmer if he can get the end product of what he needs? That's the competition. If you want the names, we got Bullvine is already doing that. We have Alltech looking into that. We have all kinds of ones looking to come into Canada to take our market. I really would like to be sitting down with you rather than standing up here talking about it. Or with a beer normally, it'd be all right too, you know. But we just have to think about what we're doing. So are we going to stand and watch somebody else come into our country? Pardon me. Or are we going to create our own future? It's up to you to decide. I'm a hesitant. I do try to rate a little bit in the Bullvine, but you know, other than that, being an admiring grandfather, that's light. But it's up to you. It's already been handed off to you. What are you going to do with it? So what are the realities? I'm going to have to speed up a little bit. Systems, we have all kinds of automated systems out there, and they don't need the national system. Most farmers can get along just fine. Because we've improved the type so much in our cattle, because we've done all these things, because they can buy the sires that'll get the job done, they don't need you or me. Oh, sorry. Go back by doing this one. So not all systems are linked. I talked about that. And that's one of the big complaints I heard from the farmers I talked to. Our past systems were all built on loyalty. You were a Holstein breeder or a Jersey breeder, or you participated in DHI. It was all loyalty. But that isn't what tomorrow's farmers want. They want service. They want results. And that's what's going to happen. So this loyalty stuff, forget the conservatives, just not really. This loyalty has to change to be service-driven. Let's be real. Farmers want fewer organizations. They told us that back in 1993 when we did the Futures Report. I don't see any fewer organizations. but they can't bring themselves to stop participating in programs. Like if I don't want to go to a grocery store, I just don't go back. They don't know why I didn't want to go to that grocery store. But our farmers seem to be quite loyal, yeah. But it won't be that way forever. Actually, I think we're dealing out of fear, not out of the future, when it's driving organizations. We're afraid to close organizations down. We're afraid to do those things. You know, breeds are 120 years old in this country. I don't know, Brad and I will have to confer on how long classification was going. I thought when I was working there, it was 1925, but nevertheless, it's a long while ago, 90-some years ago. Milk recording is 100 years old, AI is 78. They were all farmer cooperatives. Is that the way we want to continue? Farmers want the wheel, the cogs on these wheels to link up and not just maybe be off to the side or somewhere else. More realities and improvement. I talked about AI, the blow we took in Canada when we stopped the young sire incentive programs, and it was both in services and in research and development. At one time, we brought enough money in to Canada. Bob Lang did a calculation at one time, and we brought enough money into Canada to pay for all our genetic research and all our recording services and so on. So are we large enough? We won't spend a lot more time on that. The results from improvement services are not expressed in terms that the banker understands or the managers understand. You know, we have BCAs and we have classification and we have somatic cell score, we have all those things. What's it really matter if I don't know how much that costs me or how much that benefits me in dollars and cents? Because that's really, farmers are running businesses. And Brian, you'll have to forgive me, but we implemented a thing called pro dollars. No one understands what the heck pro dollars means. No one understands what TPI means. No one understands what LPI means. TPI is supposed to be the world standard around the world, and I suppose JPI or whatever it is in jerseys in the United States. Look at all these numbers. What's it mean in dollars and cents? If I'm running a 500 cow herd in Quebec, what's it matter for all those numbers? It really matters how much profit I got at the end. Because I went out and bought so many robots, I did all those things I got to pay for. Did a little bit of work. There's a group at Guelph under the directorship, I think, of David Kelton called the Dairy Research Cluster. And they asked 700 farmers what their issues were. Their management issues were: one, animal welfare. Brad's talked about that already this morning. They talked about repo health, cost of disease, and then we get to some genetic things like longevity and other health. But for the farmers, that part of it wasn't important. The genetics wasn't as important. Top diseases, lameness, I think that's probably true. Mastitis were the top diseases. The next one was was health and disease. The next one was feed, reproduction, and transition cow. I'll start back again. The top diseases were, I'm reading the wrong line. Lameness, mastitis, calf diarrhea. We don't know beans all about genetics on calf or management on calf diarrhea. Abortion or early embryonic death and respiratory diseases. That's what they found at this dairy research cluster, and they did that survey. Can West last week, thanks Neil, at the Outdoor Farm Show, had you drop a ball in, I don't know how you describe that, but if you had an issue or what your concern was, maybe it's more Richard. Maybe I should give Richard the credit instead of you, Neil, okay? And, but anyway, what was the management thing that you wanted to learn something about? And that to me says farmers say that they want to know something. And the first one was calves and heifers. And the second one was health and disease. And the third one was milk quality mastitis. Feed, reproduction, and transition, dry transition work. So really, we're supplying, in many cases, in DHI or in genetic evaluations, we're supplying with the data they're not even one in demand by the producer. They have other demands. We're going to need to meet those demands in the future. Am I way over time already? I don't know. So. Go ahead and finish it. I'm not stopping. So the realities of people are progressive producers don't have time to serve on boards. Many cases don't have time to serve on boards, the people that need to be there. And the expression is always used, they're too busy making a profit at home to worry about going on some board. I have a very close friend who 10 years ago, I said, you have to get on and start contributing back to the industry. And I encouraged him, and he got on both the genetic side and the breed side. He got involved, and 2 years later he quit. Why did he quit? He had to go to a lot of meetings. Everything was slow, and everything was defensive, and we didn't make any progress. Think about that. And there's a gap now. We can talk about this all till the cows come home, I guess, or whatever. But, you know, everything has to be real, has to be two-way, has to be virtual, it has to be all those things. And if anyone isn't in that, their history, sorry, because that's the way the world is. And meetings and seminars, what new information do you get by going to a seminar? Generally speaking, anyone who's on the web will have already looked it up. So they're not going to learn anything new by going to that. So the expense and effort and time and staff and everything else we put into it, is it really worth it? Because all I went for was the lunch and the social part. I see some people smiling, so I must not be totally wrong. I have a very good friend who last week I was talking to on the phone, and I asked him how to describe the Canadian dairy cattle improvement industry. And that friend is in the room today. And the one word he used was complacent. We're ripe for an opportunity to improve. Now, Canadian breeders are great at taking and improving the cow and doing all these wonderful things. But I don't think we're as great at setting up organizations and servicing the farmer of what they'll need in the future as we should be. And why is that? Because most of us a lot of us started with an agricultural base. And so we were 4-H trained. And our parents trained us as well. And we learned all about parliamentary procedure. We learned all about all those kinds of things. But we did not learn about how to run an organization. You want to talk to somebody about how to run an organization, talk to David Chalik about the fact that when he learned that in 4-H, but now he's been president of Stampede and all those kinds of things, and he's working for an organization that works differently, but you have to think differently if you're going to run organizations in the future. So, I guess it's going to happen on the 1st of October. We're going to have 3 organizations going together. And I don't know what you're calling that organization, so I call it Canned Dairy. And somebody will figure that out. But not canned dairy, canned dairy. And we need you to be leaders, and I'm going to talk to you from the point of view of being leaders into the future. So from the genetic improvement point of view, like I said before, we need a lot more indexes, and we need it in terms of dollar terms that farmers understand or something, because we got all these different ways of expressing things. And farm managers need decision-making ability, or they need all their reports and decisions looking forward. Historic reports are history. And as far as improvement services, there's going to be all kinds of new technology. Yesterday in the media, there was a report that half of the services that will be provided to people globally in 2025 will be by using monitors or a piece of equipment to capture that data. Now, yes, there's going to be countries that are less than that, and other countries that are a lot more. But that's the future. One of the things that concerns me greatly is that we've always stuck with milk cows. But there's heifers, dry cows, all those others. If a calf has pneumonia, does that affect their production later on? Does that affect their genetic evaluations? Sure it does. Or do we know for sure? We don't have a complete data set, and so we're asking the farmer to manage everything based on his milk cows. What we're giving them. The other competition will have that kind of information on the calves, the private groups. So it needs to be a total package. There's herd consultants. There's going to be more of those. The bigger herds get, the more consultants there will be, and the more that they'll need to be included in what you do. I still have this bias that I had 25 years ago that we need one database, we need link, we need a virtual. Talk to Karen Hand about how to get that done. Who owns the data? Karen talked about that this morning. The farmer owns the data. It's their data. But do they know how it's going to be used by anyone, everywhere? We've been hung up on everything being control and official and all those kinds of things. We just, I think, put ourselves in a very bad position. We just need to label records. This one was made on a robot. This was an owner stamp, or this was something else. What are we afraid of? The person reading the information is the one who will make the judgment. Oh, I don't use that record. Okay, fine. We try to judge everything for everyone else. We have to get away from that. We have just, here's the data, you decide whether you're going to use it or like it or not. We got to think globally. We are not a big enough country to think independently. We're going to have to find partners around the world. Okay, so you've got ICAR and Interval. They're just rules and regulations, people. We need to find partners that are providing service, not partners that are going to make more rules and regulations. Although we see what the challenges are. Of course, Mr. Trump, he wanted to do away with all the rules and regulations, but that's another challenge in itself. We won't go there. And talking about a friend or to work with someone, is the United States our friend or our foe? We live next door to them, they're our friend. But in actual fact, if you look at their dairy cattle improvement structure, we have CD, CB, I guess the right initials, but everyone's fighting for control of that, whether it's AI or milk recording or breeds. They're going to continue to fight. That's just an American way of doing things. We have a couple of Americans in the room. So I don't think that we're going to have them. The next big thing, how are we going to fund this? That is probably the biggest question. Dramatic action has to be taken. You have to cut, in my opinion, 10% out of everybody's budgets to go to a common cause. You have to use reserves, and you have to have findings and ways of doing it, because if we don't research and develop, we're going to be out of it. This is a model we work on now. We have boards of directors, and it comes down to the producer, and in between we have various groups, industries, and research, and so on. And this is what I call a top-down. Somebody decides and we tell. And it works like a little like a dictatorship. But tomorrow's farmers aren't going to be wanting that. They're going to be looking at it differently, where the board of directors are at the bottom and they lead, and it goes up from there. And notice at the top, I talk about the fact that we have global producers. We have to look at what we're going to do globally. I've only got a time limit here, so anyway. Innovation, there's going to have to be mergers. We're going to have to, right now in the world we see one breed improvement groups of a private and a co-op being put together. Those kinds of things we're going to consider, going to continue. Mergers are there. We're in a virtual world, and we're going to have to support research and development a lot more than we have. And I mean support and use, not just, well, we did that research project. We're going to have to use it, and you're going to have, what was the word, competition. That's what it's going to be. Because do you know what happens in the car industry? They fund joint research, and it's up to the speed of the company to get that research in place before the next guy. We think that we're independent and all those kinds of things. Communication strategy, we're about a decade and a half behind on that. Education systems, everything has an education system. We're going to have to work on educating or informing. Just keep going along here. The last one there, I really haven't determined or haven't found out, are breeds and breeding companies really on board with what I call canned dairy? Are they missing in action? Why are we stopping at that? So, step up. The leaders in the room are going to need to step up, because I'm talking about that bottom-up one, Norm, of leaders showing an example of what's going to happen and giving direction and setting the policy and making the finances available for the staff to take it on up. Too often in our boards of directors we talk about operations, so we have in the past anyway, rather than where we're going and what's happening. So the leaders, the directors that are in this room, I know the directors of canned dairy are in this room today, you're going to need to lead. There has to be operation teams. You know, one thing I think we need to stop is we need to cancel 75% of the meetings we have now and have them as virtual meetings. I know of one company that's been doing that for over a decade. You want to have a staff meeting? Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Last 20 minutes or half an hour. Those things have to happen. We can't be taking farmers off from their farm and expecting them to spend time traveling to meetings. So when I get finished all these things, so we're going to look for action. I thought that was different now. So don't postpone action in favor of meetings and unanimity. But there are 5 things that I think are very important as we leave here today. One is leadership. By far the most important thing is we need leadership amongst, and so get it right and set it up and get it going. The second thing is communications. Communications isn't only awareness, it's also marketing, because we're going to have to market this Canadian product that we got here. There's got to be money coming back in from somewhere, because we're too small. Third thing I want you to think about is services. You're going to need to eliminate some that aren't necessary and keep the needed or create the needed. The next one is data. To me, it's shared. It's all in one database. I was talking to Russell Gammon the other day, and Russell said, I was asking what was keeping him busy, and he always laughs, and we tell each other jokes and everything else. He said, one interesting thing the other day, he says, there was a bull that we had registered in our herd book, a Jersey bull, that was a U.S. bull, and don't shoot me, Russell, please. So we had him, and the farmers wanted to look up what his CDN values was, and he wasn't in the CDN database. What? He's sampling Canada? Yeah, he's got $50 in Canada. Oh, okay. Like, we're still not there. We're still wanting to have our own little independent areas, and I'm sorry it isn't going to work. And then also, as far as data is concerned, all these silos within a farm, you know, I've got this piece of equipment and this all there, it's got to go. We have to do more research and development. So we got this canned area getting started, and I just got 3 things from the do. They got to get 1 major focus agreed on in the first year. They need 2 goals to be determined, and they need 3 smaller medium projects to show that they're going to get there. As you leave here today, or tomorrow, whenever it's going to be, I ask you to think about accepting the challenges, embracing the opportunities, and advancing to the future. I could go on for a long while more, but my timer says I'm up. And so I thank you for your attention, and I would attempt to answer any questions that you may have.